Bears made some moves today. Justin, Rob, what does that mean?
Those are some big moves.
And one is my countryman.
That and more on this episode of the House Huddle podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the House Huddle podcast. Here are your hosts.
The middle at the 15 to the 20, breaks free of the 25 to the 30, to the outside, 40, midfield, 40, 30 to the coast, 20, 15, Hester 5, touchdown Bears!
What's up, House Huddlers?
Huddle up!
We nailed that, just like the Bears nailed free agency. Or did they? I don't know. We're going to talk about it here on this episode. Before we do, please continue to support the show by hitting the like button, leaving comments, hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already. We are less than 20 subscribers away from 1,000. I really appreciate the support over the last few weeks, and we're just going to keep trucking along, just like the Chicago Bears did today. We had talked. I mean, I was kind of down on the idea that they were going to be able to get Drew Dalman. I know Justin was on top of that, didn't think that was going to be an issue. I will say we nailed the contract. We nailed it after our adjustment, hearing he wanted 18 to 20 million. We got it on the nose, 14 million per year at 42 million. We'll talk about that later. But congratulations, guys, on getting that one right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, the thing is, look at where they're putting their resources. Trenches, trenches, trenches. And, you know, Ben Johnson, he comes in with the reputation of trick plays and kind of that type of thing. He also is very much into the analytics of the game. And to me, yards per play on offense, yards given up per play on defense, that's how you win. And the Bears were not good in the trenches, offense or defense last year. And that's where they've invested a lot of their focus in the offseason, which is, it's not as sexy as adding some of the players they added last year, but it might be way more effective.
Yeah, and at the risk of patting ourselves on the back too much, it was kind of common sense. But our way we started this offseason was top 5 Bears needs. And what did we come up with? 2 guards, a center, a defensive end, and a defensive tackle. And that's exactly what they've done to get going here. As a podcast, Rob, we had those.
Yeah. Except I was going to say I had safety, and anyone can come and attack me because I'm still down on the defensive tackle position being a top 5 need. But
so Bob, if the Bears are still looking to just spend money, how about they hire the 3 of us on their team? You know, I think we have good insight.
Well, I mean, that's part of it too. It's like it was common sense. Any football fan with any kind of brain could see those are the needs, and it's nice to see the Bears start acting in a common sense way. You need a real head coach, go out and pay for a real head coach. You need to improve your trenches, go out and improve your trenches. We'll get into a little bit more. There's still more that needs to be done in those trenches, but they've addressed the glaring needs.
Real quick, before we get to Chicago Bears content, I would just like to point out a couple moves that also took place. One of the guys who we were hoping could potentially see a reunion here, Khalil Mack, stays with the Chargers. Justin, you made it very good point. I don't remember if it was on the show or in our text thread, but basically saying once Joey Bosa was gone, it just made too much sense for Mack to also be gone. So him getting a 1-year, $18 million deal, not too bad. It was a little bit under what we were thinking. I think Spot Track had him at like 23, and we were thinking 20. But yeah, so congrats to him. Justin Fields has a new home. Former Chicago Bear. I know there's a lot of Justin Fields lovers still out there. A lot of Justin Fields truthers out there. They're all over social media. He is going to be going to the Big Apple and playing for the
quarterbacks go to thrive. That's
filling those big shoes that Aaron Rodgers left behind. But actually, a lesser known one that I just want to also throw out there. This is about the free agent moves the Bears made today. But those trades were pre-free agent moves. And you see Aaron Banks signed for 4 years, $77 million. That's the price of doing business in free agency. And you weren't getting Trey Smith, So I think those trades look a lot better now, seeing what the market ended up bearing.
And speaking of those trades, you have to think with the way the contracts are written currently, at least one of those guys is probably going to get some type of restructure, because going into today, they had a little less, or right around 40 million to play with, 42 million, depending on which site you were looking at. They overspent that probably today on face value, right? So again, we'll get into the contracts. We don't know details yet because it's legal tampering time.
Right.
Contract details will not come out until later this week. All we know right now is years signed, the total, and the guaranteed money.
Bob, you mentioned it on the episode yesterday, but it's hilarious to me that the market opens at 11 o'clock this time. Boom, millions of dollars are out the door already.
So Drew Dalman didn't know on Friday that he was coming to the Bears. I mean, 4 minutes after legal tampering opened, it's a done deal.
Right, just millions of dollars at stake.
Yeah. And I know you guys aren't on Twitter like I am, but Twitter crashed. And I have to think that it had something to do with NFL content, whether it was these people that didn't want stuff being spread soon, right? They wanted to get it for their NFL shows or ESPN. Like, I don't know if it was media guys who got involved and they were the ones crashing it. Some people were saying Canada got involved because they're getting tariffs. The CFL's trying to take
Twitter might crash too. I don't know.
It's crazy.
Yeah, but it was a fun day today. It was a fun day to be an NFL fan. It was a fun day to be a Bears fan. It was a good day today.
All right, well, let's get into the first move that they made. It was the one that, again, was a little bit surprising to me that they were able to come up with the money to do it. But Drew Dalman is a Chicago Bear. Welcome to the team. 3-year deal worth $42 million, $28 million guaranteed. What do you think about this one? Let's start with you, Bob.
Yeah, I mean, I love to see it. I was very scared that they were just going to cheap out on center again, just because the way they addressed the guards, as much as I like Tooney and like Jackson Fine, whatever, it was still just the playbook they tend to go to. Is just, let's just send a draft pick for a guy we need now, and we'll worry about the rest later. And so I assume that's just how they do business, and that's how they're going to do business at center. So it was great to see that's not the case. They went out and got the top option out there in free agency. There's reports that he took less money to come here. I don't know what that necessarily means, because the report gave absolutely no details about who or how much less money. But it's nice to see if that's the case, that the players want to come here. So it was just great to see. It's the first time that you feel good about the investment they made in the offensive line. Darnell Wright was kind of a question mark almost at number 10 when they got him. It's worked out fine, but this is like, all right, look, this is a commitment they've made to the offensive line.
Well, if he did take less money, one of the reports we were worried about in the weeks leading up to this moment was that he wanted Creed Humphrey money and something like that. And knowing he was the top guy on the market and he's only 26, he could ask for anything, and I was really glad to see the number wasn't that. I was willing to go up to maybe 16 million a year and backload and get fancy with it. But at 14, to get a guy who's hopefully at his prime and the best guy you had out there as an option, not necessarily a strong draft, nor do you necessarily want to just put a rookie in front of Caleb. But they've really solidified, at least on paper, the interior of the line. And so I also think one thing we're going to mention here and there throughout this episode is it gives you a lot more flexibility when the draft does come, by the fact that they've addressed so many of those needs. Like you said, Bob, the 5 or 6 most obvious things are just taken care of. And now you really can get creative in how you handle the draft with good draft capital that the Bears still have. Yeah.
So what I love about this is, look, Drew Dalman's only 26 years old, right? So this is like prime years, especially for offensive and defensive linemen. I feel like 25 to 28 is like your prime years that you're going to get out of these guys. He's already shown so much growth since the beginning of his career, coming in as a 4th-round pick. He fits the system perfectly. This was a great move. Now you got Joe Tooney next to him on the left side. The left side. Now you got Jonah Jackson moving over to the right side. Darnell Wright. I'm going to give you props here, Justin. Like, Braxton Jones might be the number 4, number 5 best blocker on this offensive line now.
Yeah, I mean, and even Ryan Poles is on record saying that, they hope to give him competition. Now, I don't know if that's Karan Amagaji or if maybe Will Campbell's going to be in town. Who knows? But you have that those options, that flexibility. And if he's your weakest link on your line's probably in good shape.
So now the key will be depth, right? Because they need to find guys they can put in behind these guys, as we've seen plenty of guys get hurt. I think it was 27 different line combinations last year. So we need to see other people added besides our comedian Bill Murray.
Have you forgotten about Ryan Bates?
Right. So
that's how they're going to pay for these guys.
That's probably how.
I want to amend the comment about just depth. I don't think it's just about depth. It's about depth and investing in the future of this offensive line, right? You look at this offensive
100%.
line, we feel okay about it, but Braxton Jones not on this team next year. Joe Thuney not on this team next year. Jonah Jackson, no guaranteed money next year. Right. So it's not just about the depth for this year. It's about investing in the future of this line. Now, Thuney might have an extension coming. It would make sense if he is, but we haven't heard any whispers or details of that's coming. But, it's not, again, not just about the depth. It's about truly investing in the future of this offensive line that I hope they end up doing in that draft.
Let me piggyback off that, Bob. You said you opened this episode saying it's nice to see the Bears are doing the common sense things. And I think the next step of that is this is kind of coming together as a roster that they are constructing to win now. But you also, the common sense is to bring in the youth movement behind that, because you still know and hope that Caleb is truly the future of this team. Build a roster that can grow with him and be competitive, not just next year, but on and on and on after. So I hope that's common sense, and I hope they are able to do that both in the draft and whatever other few moves they might be making.
Yeah. I don't really have much else to say about the offensive line. I feel like we hit on it so much leading up to this, hoping that Dalman was going to be the guy. If you guys don't have anything else, I do have one quick little blurb that I'm going to steal here from Next Gen Stats. So according to Next Gen Stats, and again, obviously this is an NFL set, across 9 games in 2024, Drew Dalman allowed the 5th lowest one-on-one pressure rate among centers. That was a minimum of 200 pass blocks. Dalman was left one-on-one on 45.4% of pass blocking snaps and had the second highest rate among centers. Now, I know that's a smaller sample size, right, because he didn't play a full season, but again, it just goes to show, they went out and got probably the best guy, at least on paper, hopefully the best guy on the field, to add to a position that has been a eyesore for many, many years.
Yeah, I doubt Coleman Shelton was 6th.
Probably not. I mean, he did have a decent year, and I think he just did re-sign with the Rams. So
he went back to the Rams. And, had he come back, like the role that Coleman Shelton could have in this offensive line room now is exactly why Coleman Shelton is in the NFL, because he can back up guard positions. He can back up the center position. He can play in a pinch. Like, that's fine. But you just don't want that guy as entrenched as your everyday center. And just a couple of other things about Drew Dalman. You kind of mentioned it here, but he did only play 9 games last year. He had a pretty severe ankle injury that caused him to miss 8 games. So these grades are all just based on 9 games last year. But this is pretty nice to see on the pass blocking rep. But PFF also had him as the number 4 run blocking center in the league last year. So he's a well-rounded center, and he's going to come in and he's going to be real good for us.
Yeah, I believe Bijan Robinson's best gap to run through last year was the A gap. So following right behind or to the side of Drew Dalman.
Is that where Genty likes to run?
He's definitely in the picture now.
That Genty talk for another episode.
Episode. All right.
There's lots to say there. That's all the city wants to talk about today. It's not these free agents.
You're right.
Genty.
All right. Well, Drew Dalman's not the only guy that they signed. They spent more money in free agency. They went out and got a defensive end. It wasn't the guy who we thought. It wasn't going to be Mack. It wasn't a 1-year deal for Joey Bosa. They didn't trade for Trey Hendrickson. Instead, it was
Dayo Odeyingbo.
Odeyingbo. Is that better?
Better. There you go.
Okay.
Now, let's be honest. We didn't know a whole lot about him, but as you look more and more into him and really look at his measurables, I guess you could say, this is probably a Dennis Allen signing, correct?
Oh, 100%.
6', 280 pounds.
Prototype.
And we were kind of caught off guard on this show when the Bears cut DeMarcus Walker. And one thing you could say about Walker is he could play off the end. He could be pushed inside. And that's the same thing we're hearing here, the flexibility. With that amount of size, there is some flexibility of where he'll come on the line. And another young guy. He's only 25, I believe.
25 would be 26 not until September. So
I think it's good to get a mix of youth and veteran presence. And hopefully, if he's as good of a scheme fit as maybe he is on paper, you could see some good production out of him coming off the end opposite of Montez Sweat.
Yeah, so my initial reaction when I saw this, it was, who? Like, I had no idea who he was. And I think it's because as we were looking at defensive ends this offseason, like it was kind of a deep free agent class for defensive ends. So there were 5 or 6 guys listed above him. And then he was, 6 on basically all these lists. But those other guys were the max and, either older guys or whatever. Look at him. He was the first one that kind of interesting now in retrospect. So he was a 2nd round pick from the Colts. So he's got some pedigree there as a legitimate prospect. Why would they let him go? Well, they've invested heavily in defensive ends over the last couple of years. And, last year, the 1st round pick, they got the kid from UCLA. They got Kwity Paye a couple of years ago. They have other defensive ends that I just think it didn't make sense to bring him back. He's the prototype for Dennis Allen. He's pressures the quarterback. I think he's more of a pass rush guy than run defense. But the hope is when you bring in a guy with these athletic traits, the pedigree as a 2nd round pick, and the youth that he still has, is that these next 3 years should be the best years of his career. So if the production wasn't necessarily there with the Colts, you'd like to see that with the Bears. And just kind of, I guess, one more thing as I keep rambling through this, $16 million a year sounds like a lot of money, and I understand that, but that's kind of like when you see these like number 4 starters in the MLB signing for $17-18 million. It seems like a lot of money, and it is. What you'd rather have is a guy who expected to get 6 or 8 sacks a year on a rookie deal producing that for you, but the Bears don't have that. They've missed on who's the
Dominic Robinson.
Dominic Robinson just never developed, right? We still hope that Austin Booker can be that guy, but we have a need for some production from defensive end, and that's just what it costs on the open market to fill that need.
And this signing doesn't mean they're not going to bring in a guy like that in the draft.
Yeah, you can still draft, still invest in the trenches, but you just needed to have a guy on your roster now. And so $16 million a year for some limited production, but some projection, that's just what it's going to cost you.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say, he has shown some, production because he had 8 sacks 2 years ago, 5 sacks the year before. Last year was the down year for him when he actually saw more playing time. But when we look at him, again, he's 25, going to be 26. You're going into those prime years for most football players in the trenches. Again, defensive, offensive lineman. He's not going to become – I don't think he's going to become a star, right? But when you look at his measurables, he's very similar to Cameron Jordan. So definitely fits that Dennis Allen system as far as the height, the weight, the wingspan. It's all very, very measurably the same. What's really interesting is I went back because this was prior to – he was drafted in 2021, a 2nd round pick, prior to when I got into film analysis and actually made my own rankings. So looking at this, I was like, I'm going to go back and read – some draft profiles. And one of the ones that I came up with was actually Lance Zierlein, who writes for the NFL, right? So he had him projected as a 3rd or 4th rounder, went a little bit earlier than that. Obviously, the size came into play. But listen to this. So expected him to be a 3rd, 4th round. What he has for his strengths, he's outstanding blend of height, weight, and length, potential to fit a variety of schemes and alignments. Again, the expansive wingspan is one of the things he comments about, which, again, is a Dennis Allen trait that he loves. Offers rush potential from all over the defensive line, like Justin said. He has got swivel hips, shoulders over the top of block. I saw Nicholas Moriano, who is also now with Bear Goggles On, so shout out to him, co-worker of mine now. had put a video up of him. He didn't actually get a sack on the play. In fact, I think it went for a completion, but the way that he just did like a jump chop move, it was like pretty cool to see that he's willing to make these different pass rush moves off the defensive line. Operates with a forceful hands, displaced blocks. What it does say is in his weakness, one of the reasons why I think he was going to be drafted lower is he was coming off of a torn Achilles. So that obviously is going to bring him down, right? Fundamentals and technique were a little bit off. They said that he's, a little bit raw. His elevated pad level at times was inconsistent, tends to piecemeal reps together. And that's what you saw with the Colts too. He's like very hot, very cold. So he can get on and he might be like, remember, what was it? Leonard Floyd, right? Whenever he played the Packers, he get like 2 sacks. This is kind of like what we might see in this situation. But the one thing that I found really interesting is his NFL comparison. You guys want to take a guess on who that might be?
Cameron Jordan?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Is it a former Bear?
It's a current Bear.
Montez Sweat?
Montez Sweat.
Interesting. Okay.
So
I'll take it.
That right there tells you that Dennis Allen is very intrigued by having Montez Sweat on this team as well.
Well, and Montez Sweat's more of a veteran and does a very good job setting the edge as against the run, which is not necessarily in the scouting report here, but you have the same measurables, and maybe there's something that he can learn from a Montez Sweat. So,
yeah, and I think one free agent that will be compared against throughout his tenure with the Bears is Chase Young, right? Chase Young also was young, has an even higher pedigree, so the production of the two is going to be interesting. However, I see Chase Young just signed back with the Saints officially, well, not officially, but 2 years, $51 million is the contract for Chase Young. So keeping that in mind, if that's where the Chase Young talks were going, was it even in the budget with the rest of the spending? And just we'll see how this production goes.
2 years, $51 million.
Yeah.
I like shopping at Aldi. Get that.
Wow.
Just as high quality at a lower price.
Well, you'd hope.
We're hoping.
So we got to see. But I mean, there's lots of snaps that we lost from the defensive ends last year's roster that need to be filled.
That's intriguing to me, though. That's more than Josh Sweat money.
Yeah.
At least in an AAV. I mean, I know Sweat got 4 years, but his was $19 million.
Yep.
All right. I'm good with moving on to our final free agent.
Quite a surprise here, too, right?
It was a little bit of a surprise for me.
Well, I mean, we'll get into that too. But the biggest surprise is that he was even available because, I mean,
he got cut.
The news, as I heard it, was Grady Jarrett got cut and signed by the Bears. Like it was the same news brief. So it was interesting. Rob, why don't you lead out this one so you can kind of go from
so I'm going to be a little bit negative here, so you guys can kind of like come at me and talk me down a little bit. So it's not that I didn't want them to sign defensive tackle, right? We talked about it on our episode last night where I went into the defensive tackle position and I explained how I didn't think it was that important of a need. I did still say it was a need. It just, to me, wasn't a top 5 need. It didn't meet my top 5 needs, and I explained why, right? In the history of Dennis Allen's system, like there weren't a lot of stud defensive tackles. And I felt like Gervon Dexter fit that mold right now on what we've seen in his history, that he could become that guy. Andrew Billings, to me, was a good enough guy, but I still felt you needed a DT3 because Zach Pickens is garbage. Maybe not garbage. We'll give him another chance. He's got one more year. If he can't do anything, I think he's off this team. But you need guys, right? Grady Jarrett, to me, the problem that I have with this is, one, you're paying a guy who's going to be 32 in May or before May. I think his birthday's April, actually. He's going to be 32 years old. He's coming off of a down year, but he's a very consistent defensive tackle. Like, he is an upgrade, obviously, over like Jerry Tillery, right, who we were talking about. But the money is also a lot more. Now, I know it's only $28.5 million guaranteed. To me, it's a 2-year deal, so you're only getting him till he's 34. We don't know the details on how that's going to play out. It's possible maybe they can even get rid of him in 1 year. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on that part. But my biggest concern is taking snaps away from Gervon Dexter. I saw a jump from year 1 to year 2 I don't want to see him be regressing because he's not seeing the playing time that I expect him to see between year 2 and year 3. If Jarrett is coming in to help ease Andrew Billings back into the role because he's coming off that pectoral muscle and it's going to be more of a split that way, I won't be as upset about it. I just don't want to see Gervon Dexter take that step back because he's not getting the development that he needs.
I definitely think he's coming in to take snaps away from Andrew Billings, to be honest. And I definitely knew where you were coming from when you said Dennis Allen's systems haven't had great DTs necessarily, but it doesn't hurt to have a good one. And I like Dexter. I like Billings. Like you said, he's coming off an injury. After that, you had nothing. You had nothing at all. And I'm not going to act like I watched a whole lot of Atlanta Falcons football, but pretty much every time I did, Grady Jarrett was flashing. And I get it with the age, it could be you're not getting his best years. But to me, it's a lot like the Tooney acquisition. He's a proven veteran in a position group that needed a lot of help. And I want to see what he can do. As far as the money, like you said, we don't know how it all settles out. But I am seeing a pattern with the length of these deals, as well as the guarantees kind of suggesting that they could be getting out of these after 2 years if they want to or need to. And so for right now, again, I think this roster is shaping up to be competitive as of this very next season. I think he's going to help you in that regard.
So I'll go, I guess, a little counter. Like, I am not concerned at all about Grady Jarrett taking snaps away from Gervon Dexter or Andrew Billings. This is not Grady Jarrett from 3 years ago, right? If it was, he wouldn't be available. His cap hit was only like $16 million. And then he only signed for $14.5 million, right? This is not top of the league money. This isn't, you're expecting all pro production. Kind of what I said with Dayo, like, there's snaps that needed to be taken on the defensive line. Now, you could argue I'd rather a second or third round pick come in and take those snaps that Grady Jarrett going to take. But the thing that second, third round pick won't add what Grady Jarrett will is that leadership component. Now, I know that's a little kind of nebulous and, you can't really quantify it all, but all accounts say that he's the heart and soul of that Atlanta Falcons defense. And, we had some nice, good guys on our team, but I don't think there's anybody you point to and say, yes, that's the guy who follow us. That's the guy that leads us out of a 10-game losing streak because bad things keep happening and we have no idea how to dig out of it. So I think that's a big component of why they went and got him as well. But as far as Gervon Dexter, hey, if you're the alpha, you're the man. Prove it and get all the snaps that are coming to you. I'm really not worried about Grady Jarrett taking them away from him.
Yeah, and I think too, he's not the pass rush guy, right? That we've seen over the years with him. I don't think he's gonna end up getting you 6 sacks this year. But what I think he is gonna do is help shore up that run defense because they got gashed over and over and over again. And I think that's the main area where I see the upgrade here. And then, like you said, Bob, 100%, the leadership. I mean, everyone said he was the heart and soul of the Atlanta defensive line. So he's been there for 10 years. I mean, he's been there for a long time. And for everyone to say he was the heart and soul, you're getting a guy that is going to bring a culture that is hopefully going to look a lot different than what we've seen under the Matt Eberflus era over the last year and a half.
And I know you said Dennis Allen's teams don't, emphasize the DT that much. But you mentioned how he's been a fixture in Atlanta for all those years. And many of Dennis Allen's years were with the Saints. So, he's seen him across the field and probably getting a good sense of what he's about and the way he can impact a game. So I like the signing. Like Bob said, you hear him becoming available. That's already throws you off a little. And then boom, he's with your team. That's pretty cool.
So I will say one last thing, and it's just as a whole, and before I just get a closing statement from you guys regarding today. The Bears won free agency again. They won the offseason so far again. I just want to see it actually show up in the regular season, and that's what's concerning. It's just too often we see teams get these guys that are like, and it makes it look like great on paper, and it doesn't always work out. So I'm just really hoping that, as excited as we are right now, we're still excited in October, November, and December.
Yeah, did they announce that parade? Because, I mean, this is what, 4 or 5 in a row, I think.
It's at least 3 winning the offseason.
All right, 3.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's probably not like a good idea to give a grade, but just overall, real quick, sum it up. Justin, how do you feel about today?
I feel that, as we've been saying, they've addressed all the glaring holes that they had, and they have 3 picks in the top 41 of this upcoming draft that isn't that top heavy, but has some depth to it, I would say. And so I feel like they're in a great position to start to bring in some youth to supplement what they've started, both with these trades and free agency.
I'll cheers to that. Bob, what do you got?
Yeah, a similar sentiment, but I'll just say I'm going to try to make it my goal as, Bears fan and being on this show to, like, not necessarily just always buy into the hype. Like, if you see something, say something, like, make a point, So yeah, today's the day to be excited. It's hard to say anything bad about Dalman, but I mean, I do think that you could argue that you just spent $16 million on a year on the defensive end who really hasn't accomplished much, and defensive tackle who's well past his prime. So we'll see how that actually works out. But at the end of the day, we're all pretty much proponents of drafting best player available, and these moves will fully enable best player available method in that draft, which is exciting.
Yeah, I'll wait to give a grade. And I don't even really like grades just because you never know what's going to happen. I feel like you need a few years for things to play out, but I think we can give grades maybe in like May once the draft is over. We can see the overall vision that we're expecting here. But agree with you guys. Best player available. That's our motto here when it comes to the NFL draft, and that's what I want to see. And they have set themselves up perfectly. Otherwise, guys, thank you again for following, subscribing. Hit the like button. Leave us a comment. Are you excited about these picks? If you love the Grady Jarrett pick, you love the Dalman pick, hit that like button. If you hate these picks, leave a comment. Just make sure you keep bringing the passion that we have and the passion that you guys have. I love the comment section. I don't mind defending myself. So
I'm not going to give a grade either, but I'm wondering what Caleb Williams would give the grade for.
Hey, he's got big men in front of him to keep him upright. So
there you go.
He's also got no excuses anymore. So
that's right. That's right. All right. Well, until next time, guys, bear down, claws up. I guess I should put us front and center before we do that.
it's all good.